Hello everyone, I'm Jandro Cisneros and I'm doing this video specifically for my students at Berklee College of Music. So it's going to be a private video and I want to show you exactly how to set up Vienna. And in this case, I'm going to use a string orchestra example, okay? How to set up Vienna for strings or any orchestral instrument. I'm going to use the Serenade for Strings, Opus 22. This is a minuet, second movement. It's in C sharp minor. And then the trio goes to D flat major. It was composed by Antonin Dvorak. It was first released in 1876 in December 10 in Prague. And I can tell you that it's a masterpiece. Okay, so let's start. The first thing you have to discover is from your score is to understand the tempo. As you can see, it's a dotted half note and it's 70. So this goes quite fast. So in our logic, we're going to use basically the double. I want to double that, so I'm going to use 140 in quarter note, just as a reference. It's not exactly perfect, but it works. Also, you have to realize in this chord that we have a pickup note, as you can see, and it's in 3/4, and as I mentioned before, it's in C sharp minor. Okay, so let's start by setting up Vienna. How do we do it? So as you can see, I am right now in Logic. I'm setting up the tempo, as you can see over here. Also, I'm selecting my time signature, and as you can see my grid, I can change it with my key commands. As I mentioned before in class, you can change the grid, okay? So 16 notes for now, and what I have to do first is to open a software instrument. I'm going to open a Vienna Ensemble. So if you go all the way down to AU Instruments, VSL, Vienna Ensemble, I want you to select Multi-Out 16 Stereo, okay? We're going to use a multi-timbral instrument for this, but I also want to send it to different outputs so we can have more control in our faders and do way more things, okay? So don't select multi-timbral, just keep it the way it is, multi-output, and just hit create. As you can see, now we have one instance of Vienna, and it says that it's connected. For now, I'm going to call this Vienna Ensemble, so I know what it is, okay? The first thing you have to do, as you can see over here, is that I'm going to go all the way down here, and I'm going to basically bring all my 16 tracks, 16 possibilities. But because we already have one, it's going to be in total 15. So bring all of them. I also want you to pay attention to my inputs. As you can see, we have Vienna input 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8, 9 and 10, 11 and 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So this is something to keep in mind, and this is going to be very useful in a couple of seconds. The next thing I have to do is in this case, I'm going to do let's say a small mock-up of a smaller string ensemble. Ideally, the way I will do this, as you can see, we have violin 1, violin 2, viola, cello, and double bass. As you can see, there's a lot of divisi and expands this piece for string orchestra. So ideally, if you want the best results, I will do one instance of Vienna for just my violin 1, another instance of Vienna for violin 2, another instance for viola, cello, and double bass. Just the different instances. But in this case, because I'm going to do a small ensemble, a string ensemble, I'm going to use my 16 aux tracks, okay? So the first thing I have to do is start labeling things. I know it's going to sound a little bit tricky at the beginning, but I'm going to be using 4 violins 1s, 4 violin 2s, 4 violas, 3 cellos, and 1 double bass. That's how I'm going to work on this particular example, okay? This is going to be maybe different for you, so just something to keep in mind. So I'm going to start labeling the first, and which is important to start doing it correctly. Labeling is going to be violin 1.1 because I have a bunch of violin 1s. So violin 1.2, violin 1.3. I think you're getting the idea. Violin 1.4, and we have to label everything. Violin 2.1, violin 2.2, violin 2.3, as you can see, we already cover all our 16 aux tracks. Now, I know it seems weird, I know we covered this in class, but you don't see anything right now in the timeline. So what we have to do is to bring all these tracks to our timeline, but first I want to color code them. Very important to do it right now. So I'm going to select my violin 1s, and just violin 1s, okay, I'm selecting them. You can just go right click and assign channel strip color. And I'm going to color them, let's say blue, light blue. I'm going to select my violin 2s, and I'm going to color these ones a bit darker blue. And then viola, I'm selecting them. I'm going to select the let's say pink. And then I'm going to do cello, and I'm going to select purple and double bass just to make it darker. I'm going to make it almost like dark purple, something like that. As you can see, in Violin 1.1, we have just one instance of Vienna, and the rest are just are different inputs, okay? And because remember, we selected a multi-output. So something to keep in mind is that I'm going to use this first track as my Violin 1.1. And I'm going to select the other ones, the ones that don't have Vienna. As you can see, the instance of Vienna there, just the other aux tracks. I'm going to select them, right-click in them, and create track, or Control T. Okay, now you have it. It's color-coded. It's already there. Something else I want to do quickly is just let's add some icons, so I know how to organize all this stuff. So we have our violins, we have our violas. We're going to do viola. We have our cellos, or violoncellos in Italian, and contrabassi, or double bass. Okay, perfect. Now what I'm going to do is select all of my tracks in my timeline, as you can see, and I'm going to right click and create a track stack, okay, or Shift Command D, okay, and I'm going to create a summing stack, okay, summing stack, create, and now everything is living in my summing stack. I want to label these sub strings, okay. As you can see, everything is living now out of my my summing track stack, okay, substrings. So we are heading in the right direction. Now what we have to do is to program Vienna. So this is my substrings, and as you can see, we have 16 tracks, and this is going to represent my channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, channel 4, channel 5, and so on. But why we have only 16 tracks? Very simple. Remember, we talked this in class. Our status byte, we uses the last 4 bits as the channel. So as you can see, because we have only 4 bits, this gives us 16 different values, 16 different possibilities. That's why we have 16 channels only. So this is why we're using your 16 tracks in this instance. Okay, so what we're going to do then after is selecting my substrings. I'm going to actually go to my Vienna, just click in there. It's going to, as you can see, it's going to open your little server, and this confuses a lot of people because they don't know how to access Vienna right away. So the way Vienna works is that it behaves more as a rewire. So it's an independent software from Logic. So you click in this little circle, and it's going to open your instance of Vienna. And the first thing you will see is just a master bus, and it's empty. And of course, this confuses people, but don't worry, I'm going to explain everything right now. What you have to do, as you can see right down here, you just have to insert a new Vienna Instrument Pro. And it looks like this. Vienna Instrument Pro basically is going to help you to route and set up patches and many, many things. I want you to be familiar a little bit with this. This is, remember, basics of Vienna Instruments Pro. And as you can see in the right-hand corner over here, we have patches, matrix, and presets. These are different things you can select. In this case, we're going to select patches, similar to what we do when we create a patch in Logic, okay? Also want you to realize that in the center, we have something that we call cells. They can go vertical, they can go horizontal, and then we have a lot of different options. A lot of people ask me this question, and what is the purpose of this cell? The purpose of this cell is basically to host these patches or these presets, okay? So in this case, I'm just going to go back to my score and analyze what is going on. As you can see, in my violin ones, we have legato over there, or legato, and we have a bunch of legato, and guess what? We have one little dot here. This is what is considered staccato. So I will need a legato patch and a staccato patch. And if I continue going, we have some crescendo, and we have some forte, as you can see in the dynamics. So sometimes I like to pair legato with forzato, okay? So what we're going to do now is to load our first instance of Vienna, and it's going to be our Violin 1.1. So we're going to label it Violin 1.1. And as you can see, we have a new set of menu over here. We have, if you hit Vienna Ensemble Pro, you have different menus, file, instances, edit channel. You can add new channels, and this is a good shortcut to remember, Command D, which means duplicate channel. okay? So we have now Violin 1.1. Now I want to tell you and explain you how this is created, how this is routed. For now, we have our channels in this little box over here. You will see we have 16 channels. Because this is going to be our first track, we're going to select this as our first channel. Then we have down here our outputs. You can select in this down, up and down arrow. You can select your buses or output. In this case, remember, we're doing a multi-output, multi-timbral instrument here in Vienna. So it's a multi-output. So we want to select out 1 and 2, okay? Keep that in mind. Also, a good thing that I love is that you can also color code your tracks over here. And we determine this to be light blue. So let's match this color coding tracks with our logic, okay? Which is already organized in our sessions. Perfect. So what I'm going to do now is something that you're going to repeat a lot. So I want you to memorize these steps and the steps that I already mentioned before, which are naming your tracks, setting your MIDI channel, and setting your output, okay? Now, let's load these cells. So as I mentioned before, I'm going to go to my patches. As you can see, I'm going to select chamber string, orchestral strings. Okay. Now you will see that the way Vienna organizes the strings is with this little abbreviation of VI, which means violin. VA stands for viola, VC for violoncello, and DB for double bass. Okay. And you will see different articulations and different presets and different patches. You will see staccato, détaché, sustain, forzato, legato, portamento, tremolo, pizzicato, just in violins. So you have different options. In this case, if we go back to our score, we can see that we have a lot of legato in our violins, but we also have this little dot that means staccato. And sometimes I like to pair our legato with sforzato, just to accent certain passages or certain motifs, okay? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to load this one. So I'm going to drag pay attention, so I'm going to drag my violin. Be super sure that you're selecting violin in this case. No viola, no cello, no double bass, just violin. So I'm going to drag this to violin cell A1. Now we have our keyboard is now, as you can see, is now selected. Now I'm in the second cell, I'm going to drag an sforzato. And the last one, I'm going to drag an staccato. This is just simple, but you can add as many as you want, and you can do this horizontally or vertically, whatever you prefer, okay? I'm going to keep just these 3 presets for now. I want to talk now about key switches. So as you can see, we have 3 presets here, but how do we perform these and without using our hands to click, to use the mouse? Like, we want to be more efficient. So that's why key switches are very important to you. If you go to matrix control in the x-axis, you can see this is x-axis, these are y-axis. We're going to select x-axis for now. You hit where it says none and go to key switch. As you can see, immediately we have now 3 keys over here. This means that these ones are going to send MIDI information. This is not going to play any musical note or anything. Now I'm hitting my keyboard and look how the preset is changing. Just pay attention. I'm hitting C0 basically, or C1, and C0 in the piano roll. But as you can see, our presets are changing and articulations are changing. So when you're performing, for example, so you can select your legato, and then in the middle you can change to forzato, and then staccato, okay? And you can just basically perform it and record it in that way. So you're basically in your left hand changing your key switch, in the right hand you're performing the melody and changing it. Once we're done setting up all this, I'm going to show you how to use Reverb to treat them properly, okay? So we talk about key switches, and now the next thing we have to do is to assign some expression here. What you will notice when you do this correctly, when everything is selected properly, your channel is selected, your channel 1 in this case, and your preset is also selected, you have to, what I want you to do is to go over here, down here, and select Velocity X Fade. This is going to give you a more realistic type of performance. For some reason, you have to click on in order to work. And on the second fader, I want you to have an expression. Now, I want to map this to my mod wheel in my keyboard. So the way to do that is just basically use right click, and you will see this basically blinking, and you just have to move your mod wheel, Let's see, and you can see it's working. I want to do the same thing. I want to actually map both faders to the same mod wheel. So I'm going to right click on the expression and go up and down. Okay, now both are mapped to my keyboard. Something to keep in mind is that if your keyboard has a pitch mod wheel or something similar, you have to be aware that's going to alter your pitch, and you don't want that. You want just your mod wheel. Okay, so we're done setting up our faders here and mod wheels. As you can see, we have a 127 maximum value in our faders. The question is why? I covered this in class, but the reason why is because our data bytes, not status bytes, our data bytes have only 7 bits to express this value. And because you have only 7 bits, you will see that you have only 128 possibilities, or 128 values, which gives you a range of from 0 to 127. That's why you have this range, okay? Because of our data bytes. Now, the next thing we have to do is to go to our advanced, and it's going to be basically our last move, and it's going to be go to the advanced button here. Before we were in basic, go to advanced, and now we want to give some movement to these two faders, our velocity X fade and expression. So go to control map over here, select control map, and go to velocity X fade, XF, and go and select bipolar. For some reason this works better. So place your cursor right in the center, bring it down, and it's going to give you a more realistic performance. Now I want you to select CC1, which is expression, and in this case, because it's mapped to my mod wheel, CC1 control, continuous controller number 1, and go to bipolar and move this in the center and bring it down, so you can have some more expressive. It's going to give you a more realistic expression. Okay, so basically those are the steps we have to follow to set up our Vienna Instruments Pro. Okay, so we first loaded our articulations in our cells in the x-axis. We selected our key switches, as you can see, and then we added these two faders that are controlling our velocity X fade. We turn it on, and our expression. Then we went to advanced, and in advanced, in control map, we changed to bipolar. So we change our expression and our velocity XF, so we can have a better dynamic. Okay. So now that we have the first one ready, basically what we have to do is to just duplicate. And we can duplicate these, how many, in this case, we have 4 violin 1s and 4 violin 2s, so we can do it 7 times. So remember the shortcut, channel, you can go to duplicate channel or Command D. So Command D, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to do 7 times. As you can see, everything has the same output and the same MIDI channel, so we have to change that. The good thing is that we don't have to go through the whole preset process again. So I'm going to select Violin 1.1. I'm going to rename all these things. I'm going to go Violin 1.2, the next one Violin 1.3, Violin 1.4, and then the next one I'm going to go to Violin 2.1, and then Violin 2.2, then Violin 2.3, and then Violin 2.4. Okay, very simple. Now you can select all these tracks. Let's change the color to a little bit something that represents better our logic, so they can be color coded similarly. Okay, perfect. They look similar. As you can see, my violin 1's light blue, and a little bit darker blue we have our violin 2's. Now we rename them, we change the colors. We have to do now, very important what we have to do now, and is to select the right channel number. So go to your MIDI channel right here, click the square, and select for violin 1.2 channel 2. If you don't do this, it's just not going to work. It's very important you follow these steps. And then violin, do channel 3, channel 4, and then violin 2.1 is going to be channel 5, and then we have channel 6, and then we have channel 7, and we have channel 8. Okay, as you can see, we have our channels already ready to go. Now what we have to do is to set up our outputs. So you can see violin 1.1 says output 1 and 2. So violin 1.2, we have to select the output 2, 3, and 4. This should match. As you can see, we go to logic. This should match your inputs over here in violin 1.2, 3, 4. Violin 1.3 is 5 and 6. Do you see how this is working? So now we have to do 1 and 2, output 3 and 4, and then violin 1.3 is going to be output 5 and 6, and our violin 1.4 is going to be output 7 and 8. And so forth. As you can see, I think you understand the process. 9 and 10. It's so important that you are super detail oriented when you're doing this. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And you're going to feel frustrated, of course. So, and then go to 15 and 16. So for now, I have all my outputs. Everything is color coded. We have my MIDI channels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's correct. Output 1, 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8, 9 and 10, 11 and 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Perfect. So we have our violin 1s and violin 2s all ready to go. Now we're ready to bring our violas, okay? So the way to start with the violas is, again, start with a blank instrument. So we go down here, as you can see, and just hit the button, and it's going to bring you a new Vienna instrument. As you can see, it's completely blank. Let's label this Viola 1. Let's also color code it and make it the same color as our Logic. Viola 1 is pink, so let's put it pink in our Vienna. Okay, something else I want to mention is our MIDI channels. Okay, remember, you have to follow these steps perfectly all the time, otherwise it's not going to work. It's very important that you do this accurately. So Viola 1 goes to channel 9, okay, MIDI channel 9. And guess what? We have a master bus. We don't want this to go to the master bus at all. So what we have to do is go to our Viola 1 in Logic. You will see your input to set to 17 and 18, okay, 17, 18. So that's the number we want. So we want to reconnect and open again Vienna Ensemble service. And in master bus, our output, instead of a bus, we're going to send it to 17 and 18. Do you see what I'm doing here? So check the outputs again. Violin 1.1 is 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Perfect. Great. So let's select our viola. It's now empty. So now let's start again setting up our patches for viola. Let's bring back the score from our Serenade for Strings, the minuet, and let me show you what the viola is doing. So as you can see, viola is having a lot of staccatos, and our divisi down here is having some legato as well. So I think we may use similar articulations than the violins. So let's do the same thing. So it can be easier for us. So let's go to our viola. Is set for VA. Remember, you have to set the right instrument. Otherwise, if you don't do it right, it's not going to work properly. You're going to feel confused. Okay, so VA starts for viola. So let's start with a legato. So VA legato to A1 to our x-axis. So cell 1. So x-axis, let's bring it 3 cells. And then the next one is going to be sforzato. And our A3, we're going to have an staccato. Okay, perfect. So we did the first thing. We loaded our patches, our presets, articulations right here in our x-axis. The next thing is that we want our x-axis right here in Maxi Control to set to key switch. Okay, we want a key switch to C1, C#1, and D1. Remember, this is the C1 in your keyboard, right? And you can see I'm moving my keyboard, I'm pressing the keys, and my articulations are changing. But in the piano roll, the C1 is actually C0 for you to know. It's going to be important to understand this. The next thing we want to do is to set our faders here so we can have a more realistic articulation. So the first thing you have to do is to make sure to select your viola track. Select your track, okay. So now that you selected your track in Logic and also you are having this track selected over here in Vienna, go to your fader and select expression. Okay, and under expression you will see velocity X fade. Select that one for now, velocity X fade, and turn it on. Just turn it on. Okay, and now in the next fader we want to have expression. Okay, similar to what we talked before, same thing. Right click, go to your mod wheel, bring it up and down so it can be mapped to the right expression controller. That is in this case going to be CC1. Now bring it again up and down. Now expression and velocity X fade are connected. The last thing we have to do is to go to our advanced window over here, select advanced, and over here in control map, go to velocity X fade, and go to bipolar, set in the middle your cursor, click and bring it down. Boom, okay? You want to do the same thing with expression, go to bipolar, click in the middle, bring it down, okay? Done. So we're done setting up our violas. Okay, go back to basic. And now what we have to do is duplicate the violas. We talk about having just 4 violas for this small ensemble, string ensemble. So remember the shortcut, Command D. So we have 1 and 2, so 3 and 4. So we have 4 violas now. Remember, this is a copy and paste. This is exactly the same as a viola 1. So we don't want that. What we want is just the same presets, which is fine. But what we don't want is the routing and our MIDI channels. So we have to change our outputs and our MIDI channels. So this is going to be viola 2. Let's label it properly, viola 3, this is viola 4. Again, double check what this is so important that you do this right. So go to your viola 2 and select your MIDI channel 10, the next one, okay? And then the next one is going to be 11, and the last one is going to be 12, okay? So everything should be sequentially perfect. So you have violin 1.1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Imagine, if you don't do this right, you're going to feel a lot of frustration. So it's important that you do this very methodically and with a lot of attention to detail. Now, we don't want the same output in violin viola 2. We don't want the 17 and 18, because if you can see over here in viola 2, we have on our inputs 19 and 20, and then 21 and 22, and 23 and 24. So that's what we want to, that's the outputs that we need for our Vienna Instruments Pro. So let's send this viola 2 out to our 19 to 20 stereo out, and the viola 3, select the viola 3 out to 19 to 20, 21 and 22. And then viola 4, let's set these to output 21, 22, 23 and 24, okay? We have that already selected. So viola 1, viola 2, viola 3, and viola 4. Our outputs or MIDI channels are 9, 10, 11, and 12. And our outputs are 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24. And we can confirm that over here. 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Perfect. We have everything properly, okay? It's good to be organized. This is very important. Okay, now that we have our violas, what else is missing? We are missing our cellos and are missing our double bass. So we have to do the same thing. I'm going to select one new instance of Vienna Instruments Pro. You have a brand new channel, empty, which is great. And we're going to call this Cello 1. We talk about doing 3 instances of cello, but in this case, Cello 1. So let's just figure out the color of the cello. So it's kind of purplish, purple, it's kind of purple. Something like that. So let's color this properly. So change color. Let's see that, something like that. I think this is like a dark blue or something. Yeah, I think this is correct. It's similar. Okay, something like that. Perfect. Now we have our color. We have to make sure that our MIDI channel is the proper one, the correct one. So we have viola 4, MIDI channel 12. Now this is channel 13. Great, that's good. And guess what? We just have not many channels available, 14, 15, and 16. Great, which is great. We have cello 2, 3, and double bass. We have 1 double bass. So we have enough. Perfect. Now our cello outputs, we don't want to 23 and 24. We don't want to go to master bus. Let's go to our Logic, go to cello 1, and you will see 25 and 26. Perfect. That's the output we need. So, or you can follow exactly what is after 23 and 24. So go to outputs and select 25 and 26. Perfect, we have our output selected. So all this routing is done properly now. Make sure to select in Logic your cello track, okay? And in Vienna, now let's start loading our articulations. But now let's go to our score and let's find our violoncelli or cello. Let's hide these thumbnails for now. Let's use the violoncelli for now. Okay, the violoncello. So we have right away staccato, as you can see, staccato, pianissimo. Okay, we're looking for different articulations, staccato, violoncello. What else do we have? Okay, we have some legato. And in this case, for example, do you see these 2 notes at the same time? This is called double stops. For a MIDI mockup, you don't want to perform this at the same time. You want to record one line on called upper DVC and lower DVC. So you want to have 2 different instances in MIDI, in Vienna basically, or in Logic, taking care of these basically double stops, okay? For you to know. So I think we're going to use similar articulations that we use for the violin 1, violin 2, and viola. So I'm going to go to my cells. I already know I'm going to bring 3 cells in my x-axis. I'm going to go now to VC. Guess what? VC stands for violoncello. Okay, remember, this is important that you drag the right preset, the right one, the right articulation to your Vienna Instruments Pro and to your right cell, okay? So we're going to start with VC8, that is a legato, and then select the A2 and go to sforzato. And the RA3 is going to be our staccato, okay? So we have our staccato, legato, sforzato, and staccato. Now, as you know already, this by memory, go to your x-axis, select your key switch. Now you have your key switches over here. You can test them. Always test your key switches. They're working perfectly. Now let's go to our expressions. There are 2 faders. Let's go to expressions, and in expression go to velocity X fade. Once you have velocity X fade, click on. Now the next one, go to expression. Okay, now let's route this. Right click, move your mod wheel. Is working. Right click, mod wheel. As you can see, we're doing this super fast now because we're pros, professionals. We know how to do this now. Okay, so it's fantastic. Okay, now that we have this basic window ready, now let's go to our advanced window, control map, go to expressions, bipolar, click in the center, bring it down. Go to velocity XF, bipolar, center, bring it down. Okay, so we have quickly already done this basically routing, this process, these patches, everything is ready in Vienna Instrument Pro for our cellos. Okay, now let's duplicate this. So we have cello 1, so we have 3 instances. We're going to duplicate this 2 times. So Command D, Command D. Okay, 2 times. Now, as you can see, it's exactly copy from cello 1, which is great in terms of presets, but it's not great in terms of routing. So we have to change this. So cello 1 becomes cello 2. Now let's rename this to cello 3. MIDI channels are different now. So we are going to go to channel 14, and this is going to go channel 15. Do you see? Channel 15. And now let's select our outputs. So we have output 25, 26. This is going to go to 20. Let's go actually to Logic to double check this better. So cello 2 and cello 3, our inputs are, as you can see here, 27, 28, and 29 and 30. Okay, so let's go back to our Vienna and let's select our, by the way, if you want to go to Vienna and you don't know how to do it, just bring this window and click in this center circle. I'm going to bring you back to Vienna. Okay, now go to 25, 26, 27, 28, and then the last one is 29, 30. So it's 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Do you see? This is looking beautifully. So we're almost done. One more thing is missing, is our double basses. So click again, one instance of Vienna. We call this double bass. Okay, let's color code it according to what we have here. There's very basically Logic, we have it really dark blue. So let's go to right click, change color. Let's go to our dark blue. Is that a dark blue? Maybe not. It's interesting. Let's do something. I think I made a mistake here with the color coding of the cellos. Oops, let's bring this down. So for the cellos, let's change the color a little bit. So let's do a little bit lighter. Okay, that's better. Double bass is a bit darker. Okay, it's getting better. 34. Okay, now check this MIDI channel over here. So we don't want channel 15. We want this to be channel 16, which is our last channel. So we have, so let's count again from the top. So we are doing this properly. So go with Violin 1.1. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then we have 13, 14, 15, and 16. Beautiful. Great, 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 great. Fantastic job. Okay, now let's set our output in our double bass. We don't want this to be a master bus. We want to be, let's go to our double bass track. Our input says here 31 and 32. So click this little circle. Now we go back to Vienna and 31, 32. So we want to bring it to our output 31, 32, which is our last one. Okay, double bass is great. Now let's go to our score so we can start loading some articulations. Right away, it started with pizzicato. So far, the other instruments didn't play any pizzicato. So this is it's going to be different. Articulation for double bass is going to be different. So we have pizzicatos, and then we have, it's coming back to arco, as you can see. And then we have some legato. And guess what? We have some staccato. Okay, so let's do something. And let's start by loading. In this case, I'm going to load 4 instances, 4 articulations. And to find the double bass, you will see it's set to dB. Do you see how it's dB? This is the preset, this is the patch, this is exactly the articulation you want to use for double basses. You don't want to use any of the VL, violin, or violoncello. You want to use double bass, dB, okay? So the first one, you go to, let's start with the pizzicato. Pizzicato, because the music is asking us for pizzicato. And then let's do, and the remaining 3 ones, I want to keep it similar to what we did with the other instruments. So the first one is going to be just different. So I'm going to go with legato, and then sforzato, and then we go to staccato. Okay, perfect. So we have our x-axis all covered with articulations. Now, as you already know, we go to key switch. We have our key switches, but now we're going to have 4 notes. So from C to C sharp, D to D sharp, okay? We have them already. But you can change this. You can actually move these. For example, our A-B switches that we're not using, we can just move them You can just select none if you want, so you don't, in case you don't want the A/B switches, which we're not using at all in this case. And our switches, we can just change them. Instead of being C1, what about moving these to be C, just in a range that is not in our way? Because we don't want to be having a key switch exactly in the area where we have actually notes, and we don't want to be in the same range of our double bass. So in this case, I'm using C4 as my double. As you can see, this is already, man, actually maybe just in cases for safety, let's bring it to C5, just to be totally safe. So it's better. So in C5, as you can see, I'm changing from pizzicato, legato, sforzato, staccato. So I move my key switches to C5. I just drag this little arrow up, and that's how I move them. Okay? That's how you move your key switches. You can also remove your key switches by selecting none. And the Y-axis, if you want also, for example, when you have other articulations down, this is how you can use it. For example, if I have, imagine, let's say a détaché articulation here, I can set a key switch, and you will see now they're green, and I can go up and down with these key switches. You see, up and down. But in this case, I don't want any Y-axis key switches. None, and let's bring it up. This is resize. Perfect. So now we have our key switches to C5, C sharp 5, D5, and D sharp 5. Now we want to set our expressions over here. Expression, velocity, X fade. Turn it on and go into the next fader and click expression. We want to right click, move your mod wheel, do the same thing. Mod wheel, great, we already have that, we already mastered that. So we already know how to do that perfectly. So go to advanced, again, control map, go to velocity XF, go to bipolar, click in the center, bring it down. And then to the expressions, bipolar, bring it down. Okay, a little bit. Okay, you can fine tune this, whatever you want. Okay, go to basics, and guess what? We are all set. We are completely done with our Vienna Instruments Pro in terms of setting up our MIDI channels, our outputs, our color codings, our names, our articulations, our velocity X fades and expressions, and our mapping basically, and also our movements, our control maps, our bipolar movements. So we have already, we're done with this. So we can hide our Vienna Ensemble Pro. We can move this away. And now as you can see, you can now monitor your instruments by just hitting, just by selecting every track. As you can see, now I'm having Violin 1.1, Violin 1.3. We can go all the way down. We have our viola. So you should be able to, if you routed this properly, the way I show you, you should be able to have sound right away. But remember, I'm selecting the right track. Otherwise, if I'm selecting viola 4, for you to know, you're not going to be able to listen or to play Violin 1. Okay, remember that lesson. If you are in viola 4, just that track is going to be enabled to monitor some sound or record music. Not Violin 1 or Violin 2 or anything like that, okay? Remember that. Now I'm in cello, making sure that I'm getting levels, and I'm going to my double basses as well. As you can see, I monitor every single channel. I'm getting levels in every single one of them. So everything is working. And the benefit of doing it in this way as an aux track is that now we have a beautiful thing here. We can move our faders individually, and we can basically make some magic, do some automation with these faders. It's phenomenal. Okay, great. So now I want to introduce a new concept, and this one is about how to set up the reverb. As you can see, we have our substrings over here, and if you open, of course, you see all your tracks, and then we have our stereo out and a master track. What you have to do, and the first thing you have to do, is to go to your output in your substrings, okay, and select the bus. You can select bus 2, okay, and you will see a new bus is going to show up. Let's label this sub master, okay. Let's also color code this a little bit greener, a little bit darker. So now that we have our sub master track, we have to build our 2 reverbs. And what we want to do, and the main goal here, is to send one small reverb to our substrings and a whole reverb to our sub master. That's the goal. And then we're going to blend all of that together. That's going to be the magical way of mixing reverb with this string orchestra. Okay, it's a fantastic solution. So now in my sub strings, I'm going to go to send over here, bus, and I want to select number 3. As you can see, we have a new aux, and let's call this reverb small, okay? Now in my submaster, I'm going to send this to another bus, and I'm going to select bus 4. So I'm using 2 different reverbs, one small reverb for my sub strings, and I'm going to use a whole reverb for my submaster. So I'm going to call this reverb whole. Okay, I want to color code these tracks a little bit similar to my submaster, but at least, you know, so I can know they're important, but a little bit different. Okay, so now we have a reverb small and a reverb whole. We can then fine tune with our faders the level of the reverb. Let me quickly talk about gain staging. Something you have to keep in mind is that by using this send over here, I'm basically sending all my tracks to my bus, which is going to add into my gain stage. So that's something for you to keep in mind, okay? The same thing here with bus 4, okay? So we're going to have bus 3 with my small reverb into my sub strings, and bus 4, my reverb whole to my sub master. Now let's quickly just select our reverb small plugin. So let's go to Reverb Space Designer. We already know this, super simple. You can load your impulse response over here. And for now, let's select this one. I already have this one ready. Nice small plate. Okay, perfect. We have that ready. Now we go to a reverb whole. The same thing. We go to Reverb Space Designer, and we can keep the one that we have by default, large and bright, just for now. Okay, so we have our reverbs, and that's it. This is the way you set up the reverbs when mixing strings or when you're doing anything in general, actually. This is a fantastic solution. So my sub strings are having my reverb small and my submaster, my reverb whole. And in this way, everything with my submaster is basically going to glue all together by sending all these tracks basically to the same space, which is going to give you the notion that everything is coming from the same location, which is what we want. So this is what you need to know to set up your reverb. So something I wanted to mention once you're doing your MIDI mockup, and this is how the key switches come in hand. So I'm going to double click in this instance for now, and as you can see, I have my notes over here that corresponds to my score, the notes of my score. But now I want to mention how to set up the key switches. If you can't perform it and you're not a piano player and you don't know how to do the key switches right in Vienna, as you can see, I'm right now in Violin 1. Let's go to Violin 1 all the way up. So now, as you can see, we have our legato, sforzato, and staccato. How can we do this if we are not performers, piano players? So how we do that? So you can draw these key switches. And then remember, you have to understand that this instance is going to help you. This MIDI event is going to tell the note, the controller, a note, basically a note on and a note off. So you want to set the key switch before the note starts playing. Okay, so my note starts right here. Remember, it's a pickup, so we started right here. So I want to set my key switch before my first note. And in this case, as I mentioned before, piano roll is C0, but in our Vienna instruments, is set to my key switch to be C1. You can see number 1, or you can see it over here, C1. So it's something to keep in mind. So as you can see now, C0 represents C1 in Vienna instruments. Okay, so what I did is that I draw this MIDI event, and this one stands for legato, because this is basically focused on the first melodical elements. As you can see in Violin 1, we have legato. So I'm going to say legato. And then we have some staccato notes later here, some staccato notes. But also we have a repetition of the melody. As you can see, we have the melodic in C sharp minor. Anyways, you can see that this is performed twice. As you can see, you have the D sharp, which is the reason why this becomes C sharp minor. You have the same motif here in legato, and again. What I want to do is that the first one I want to do, let's say legato, and the next one I want to do is sforzato. So it can be a bit different, the performance. So the way to do that basically is that you go select the section, and you can see it repeats very similar. The first one, you can just bring this to whatever you want to be. So in this case is legato, that is here, C0. And then you can just basically copy and paste this same and bring it to D sharp, which stands, remember the key switch for D sharp is our sforzato, okay? Sforzato, articulation. So now you have a D sharp, and then I'm going to come back to legato. So now by just drawing my key switches, automatically my articulations are going to change based on my performance. But that repetition starts in bar 7. I want to start, remember, I want to move my event at least a little bit before my event starts. Otherwise, it's not going to work properly. So move my MIDI event a little bit before, and you don't want to overlap this information. These are not notes. These are instructions that you're giving to your articulations in Vienna instruments. Okay. Anyway, so this is something to keep in mind, something that I wanted to mention about key switches and when you're drawing it. So once, imagine that you're done doing, in this case, just for me, for demonstration purposes, I didn't even finish the whole thing, but I just did it quickly just to show you. In this case, if you just go to your piano roll or Command 4, you just go to your automation, you select here in the automation button, and then you can automate many things. You go to note velocity, and in this case I'm using note velocity, and you can improve the performance you did by bringing it up and down. Remember, we have velocity of maximum 127, which is the reason why, remember, the lowest velocity is number 1. Why? Because this is connected to our data bytes. Okay, our data bytes are giving us just 7 bits to represent our values in velocity. That's why we have only 128 values, which give us from 0 to 127 possibilities. In this case, we don't have 0 because 0 will imply a note of instruction, which is not what we want. Okay, so anyways, we can change our velocities over here. You can, if you want, you can actually automate your MIDI volume, but in this case, there's no reason to automate MIDI volume because you can automate actually your violin ones over here in your fader. You can automate it here. You know, you can just go and touch, you can do right or touch or latch, whatever you prefer. And then you can, whenever it's performing, you can just move this and automatically you will see MIDI information. As you can see, I'm automating right away. So that's something you can do with your faders. That's why we did all this process for the automation. And finally, something I wanted to talk about is the panning. So once you're done sequencing and recording all these instruments, what you have to do is to take care of the panning. Basically, the way you access to the panning window is that, as you can see, you just have to go over here where it says mixer, and you will access your mixer. The panning features in Vienna is phenomenal, honestly, way better than any other place. So I would recommend you using this feature. So what you have to do is let's pan violin 1 all the way, as you can see in this area. Okay, I'm going to move all my violin 1s. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. You can, let's go with the left. Now let's go to our violin 2s. We're going to go, as you can see, it's like a pie. I want to go the one in the middle here. Here's this violin 2s, you can see. So we have like 1, 2, 3, 4 slices. I'm using the first one for my violin 1, the second one for my violin 2, and then viola, and then cello. And double bass, I'm going to make it cover the whole spectrum. Okay, so this is violin 2. Now let's move this violin 2, almost done. Perfect. Now let's go with our viola 1. Viola is our third pie slice or pizza slice, whatever you want to call it. It's just to be funny. Okay, so we have over here, we're moving my viola. This is fundamental that you do this properly. It's way better than doing it directly from Logic. So this is great. So now we have our viola and we're going to go directly to our cello. Okay, our cello is all the way to the right. Oops, let's go all the way, the last one. We're using the seating chart from the orchestra seating chart. So, and the last one is double bass, and I'm going to keep it in the full spectrum. And lastly, something I wanted to mention, which is very important, is that when you're doing a MIDI mockup, you want to make sure that you perform, in this case I have 4 violin ones, you want to perform 4 different times this information. You don't want to copy and paste this. You don't want to do that. Because if you copy, basically it's going to be the same quantized version of the same performance. You want to basically become a different player. So you want to make sure to perform it in this case, 4 different times. Violin 1, 2, violin 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. You want to perform it at least 4 times. The same with violin ones, violas, cellos, and double basses. In this case, just one instance of double bass. That's what you want to do, okay? Perform it many, many different times, okay? So you can have different performances, different velocities, and all of that is going to give you the essence of basically of a string orchestra in this case, okay? So that's it. I think you got it. It was complex, but you can do it, okay? I believe you can do a fantastic job, and I hope you can use this new skill, this new tool, this newest ability to make and sequence phenomenal music, okay? Thank you so much. I'm Jandro Cisneros. It's a pleasure to be with you, and goodbye!